Mr. President, every day in America we face a devastating reminder of the toll of gun violence. Today we are watching the horrific scenes at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where yet another school shooting has taken place. It is gut-wrenching. We know that so many families have just had their worlds and lives changed forever by senseless gun violence. Ironically, this is the 10th anniversary of a similar shooting at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois. Our prayers go out to the victims, to those families, and to the first responders, and of course to the Parkland community. Yesterday, in the city of Chicago, which I am honored to represent, we lost one of our finest, Commander Paul Bauer of the Chicago Police Department, shot and killed by a gunman in the Chicago Loop. Commander Bauer was a 31-year veteran of the CPD and the commander of the 18th Police District in the near North Side. He was a pillar of that community. Well known in his district, he'd been commended to the City Council last year for a charity holiday party he'd helped host for underprivileged kids. A husband to his wife Erin, a father to a 13-year-old daughter named Grace. Commander Bauer was at a training session yesterday in the Loop, but he didn't hesitate to help out his fellow officers when they were pursuing a fleeing suspect. Commander Bauer was shot several times by the suspect, and he died from his wounds. Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson said this was an extremely difficult day for the Chicago police family. Commander Bauer was a hero in life and made the ultimate sacrifice to help protect the city he served and the city he loved. His loss is a tragedy. Our prayers go out to the commander's friends, colleagues, and his loved ones, and of course his family and daughter. As I mentioned, today marks the 10th anniversary of one of the most devastating shootings ever to occur on a college campus in America. On February 14, 2008, a gunman with a history of mental instability walked into a lecture hall at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb and opened fire. His bullets killed 5 students and wounded 17 more. It was a horrific mass murder, and it shocked the entire nation. The 5 young Illinoisans we lost that day all had bright futures ahead of them. Gail Dubowski, 20 years old, from Carroll Stream, who worked as a camp counselor and was a talented singer in her church choir. Catalina Garcia of Cicero, 20 years old, a smiling, outgoing young woman who planned to be a teacher. Juliana Gahant of Mendota, 32 years old, who served our country in the United States Army and Army Reserve, and who went to NIU to study to become a teacher. Ryan Mace of Carpentersville, a 19-year-old who was funny and fun to be with and who aspired to work as a counselor. And Daniel Parmenter, 20 years old, from Westchester, a rugby player who lost his life because he shielded his girlfriend from the shooter. It is heartbreaking to think of what these 5 young people could have accomplished in the 10 years since that horrible day. We mourn their loss, and our hearts go out to their families again. We remember and honor the wounded who still bear the scars of that terrible day. We renew our thanks over and over again to the law enforcement officers and first responders who headed toward the sound of gunfire that day and who treated the victims after they were wounded. We commend the many members of the NIU community who stepped up in the days that followed, working to persevere through this tragedy with heavy hearts but unbroken spirit, and moving forward, together forward, in the words of that Northern Illinois University Husky fight song. It is devastating to think that in this great country, students and educators could be gunned down in our schools, but it happens so often that I'm afraid a numbness is setting in. Just in the last few months, we have had fatal shootings of students at Aztec High School in Aztec, New Mexico, Wake Forest University in North Carolina, Marshall County High School in Benton, Kentucky, and then today in Florida. Other tragedies have been narrowly averted because of well-trained staff. At Mattoon High School in Illinois, a heroic teacher named Angela McQueen stopped a student gunman from causing a massacre there last September. The threat of shootings in our schools is ever present. According to a tally kept by the group Every Town, there have been at least 18 incidents so far this year where a gun has been fired on a school or college campus. Schools and colleges are doing the best they can to prepare and protect their students. I salute the educators and administrators who are working hard. But is Congress doing all that it can to keep our nation's students safe from gun violence? Not even close. Of course, there is no single reform that could stop every shooting in America, but we know there are big gaps in our laws that make it easy for criminals, abusers, and mentally unstable people to get their hands on guns and hurt innocent people. Congress has done nothing in recent years to close those gaps and make America safer. Congress hasn't even closed the gun show loophole that the 1999 Columbine, Colorado killers used to buy their weapons. And we did nothing in response to the murder of 20 first graders and 6 educators at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. In fact, the only vote taken by the Senate on gun laws in this current Congress was to weaken gun law safety provisions on the books. That was a vote Senate Republicans brought up last year that prevented the Social Security Administration from alerting the FBI's gun background check system about people with mental illness. It is likely that before this year is over, the Republican majority will call up more bills to weaken gun safety laws. That is the wrong response to the epidemic of gun violence in America. I'm not going to give up on trying to close the loopholes in our gun laws. I'm going to keep fighting for universal background checks, tougher straw purchasing laws, and better laws to prevent gun theft. I'm not going to give up because of people like Patrick Corellis, who was shot in the head 10 years ago at the tragedy at Northern Illinois University. Luckily, Patrick survived, and since that day, he's been a leader in Illinois fighting for common sense gun reform. I've come to know and admire him for his efforts. No one should have to go through what Patrick went through, and so many others went through on that day in DeKalb, Illinois, 10 years ago. We owe it to Patrick and to the other NIU victims and families and community members, and to the hundreds of thousands more across America who've been killed or wounded by guns this past decade, to keep trying to reduce the toll of gun violence. Maybe we can't stop every shooting, but if we do our best to keep guns out of dangerous hands, we will save lives. I intend to keep doing my best to achieve that goal. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the evidence of call.